The twins were 8 months old when Jasmine's life began to shift. Not dramatically. Not yet. But in small ways that felt like cracks of light breaking through a door she'd thought was permanently sealed. She'd left the shelter 4 months earlier, moving into a cramped studio apartment in a building where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought loudly at 2 in the morning. But it was hers. The twins had a corner with a donated crib they shared, and Jasmine had a mattress on the floor. It wasn't much, but it was better than the communal cots and fluorescent lights and the constant feeling of being watched. The cleaning job at the Meridian building had let her go after the twins were born. "We need reliable employees," Gloria had said, as if Jasmine's premature labor had been a personal betrayal. The grocery store had followed soon after. But through Sister Margaret's connections, Jasmine had found work as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm called Morrison & Associates. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it was daytime hours, and Mrs. Chen from the shelter watched the twins for $20 a day. Jasmine had thought she'd be filing paperwork and answering phones. And she did do those things. But she also noticed other things. The way the office was organized made no sense. Files were scattered across 3 different systems. The partners spent hours looking for documents that should have been at their fingertips. Meetings ran long because no one had prepared agendas. Clients waited weeks for responses because nobody tracked deadlines properly. Her business degree from State, the one Kendrick had mocked as worthless, had taught her about operational efficiency. And her years of juggling 3 jobs while pregnant had taught her how to maximize every minute, every resource, every ounce of energy. "Mr. Morrison," she'd said one afternoon, finding the senior partner digging through a filing cabinet with growing frustration. "If you're looking for the Hendricks file, it's in the cabinet by Susan's desk. But I could reorganize the filing system so everything's in one logical place." He'd looked at her like she'd just offered to solve world hunger. "You could do that?" "Yes, sir. It would take me a few hours after work, but I could create a system where any file could be found in under a minute. I'll pay you overtime." She'd stayed late that Friday, the twins with Sister Margaret, and redesigned the entire filing system. Color-coded, cross-referenced, alphabetized with a master index. When she'd finished at midnight, every document in the office had a place, and every place was labeled. Monday morning, Mr. Morrison had found the Hendricks file in 30 seconds. By Tuesday, all 3 partners were talking about the miracle Jasmine had worked. By Wednesday, they'd asked if she could look at their scheduling system. Within a month, Jasmine had streamlined their entire operation. She'd created templates for common documents, set up automated reminders for deadlines, reorganized the office layout so workflow moved more efficiently. The partners were seeing more clients, finishing work faster, and, according to office gossip, billing significantly more hours. "You have a gift for this," Mr. Morrison had told her, signing her overtime check. "Have you ever thought about consulting?" The word had lodged in Jasmine's mind like a seed waiting for water. 3 weeks later, Mr. Morrison's brother-in-law mentioned he was struggling with his small construction company. The paperwork was a disaster. Jobs were running over budget. Clients were unhappy. Mr. Morrison had given him Jasmine's name. "I don't know if I can help," Jasmine had said when Tom Brennan called her. "I've never worked in construction." "Morrison says you're a genius at organization." "I don't need construction expertise. I need someone to tell me why I'm working 80 hours a week and still losing money." That Saturday, while Mrs. Chen watched the twins, Jasmine had visited Brennan's cluttered office in Queens. Papers were stacked everywhere. The computer system was from 1995. Job estimates were handwritten on loose papers that disappeared regularly. She'd spent 6 hours analyzing his operation, and the problems were obvious. He was underbidding jobs because he wasn't tracking his actual costs. He was paying for materials twice because he had no inventory system. His crew was inefficient because jobs weren't properly scheduled. "Here's what I see," Jasmine had told him, spreading out the notes she'd taken. "You're bleeding money in 3 areas: materials management, labor scheduling, and job estimation. If you fix these 3 things, you could probably increase your profit margin by 30%. Tom had stared at her. "Can you fix them?" "Yes. But I'd need to implement new systems." Train your staff. It would take about a month of part-time work. How much? Jasmine's heart had pounded. She'd never named a price for her expertise before. She thought of the twins, of Jordan's cough that needed medicine, of Jada's formula that cost $40 a can, of the rent that was due in 5 days. $500, she'd said, then immediately regretted it. Too much. She'd asked for too much. He'd laugh at her, or worse, get angry. Tom had pulled out his checkbook. I'll pay you half now, half when you're done. If this works, I'll recommend you to every contractor I know. Jasmine had stared at the check, $250 made out to her name, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking this time. Opening. Like a door she hadn't known existed. For the next month, she'd worked at Morrison & Associates during the day and at Brennan Construction every evening and weekend. She'd created a digital inventory system using free software, designed job estimate templates that calculated real costs, developed a scheduling system that maximized crew efficiency. She'd trained Tom's office manager and 2 foremen on the new processes. When she'd finished, Tom's jobs were running on time and under budget. His clients were happy. His stress level had dropped visibly. This is incredible, he'd said, handing her the second check. You just saved my business. That night, Jasmine had sat on her mattress with the check in her hands. $250 that represented something far more valuable than money. It represented proof. Proof that she had value beyond cleaning toilets and scanning groceries. Proof that her mind, her education, her problem-solving abilities were worth something in the world. The twins were asleep in their crib, Jordan snoring softly, Jada's tiny fist curled against her brother's back. Jasmine looked at them and then at the check, and suddenly she was crying. Not the desperate, hopeless tears she'd shed so many times in the past year. These were different. These tears tasted like possibility. She thought of Kendrick, of his sneer when he'd called her worthless. She thought of his words. You can't polish trash. She looked at the check again, at her name written in Tom's decisive handwriting, at the proof that someone valued her skills enough to pay for them. Watch this, she whispered to her sleeping children. Just watch what Mama's going to do. The next morning, she'd called Mr. Morrison and given her notice. She had a new business to start. She had a future to build. She had 2 babies depending on her to prove that the man who'd thrown them away had made the biggest mistake of his life. And this time, she wasn't asking permission. She wasn't waiting for anyone to save her. She was going to save herself. 5 years of grinding had transformed Jasmine in ways she barely recognized. The woman who stared back at her from the mirror in her small but clean 2-bedroom apartment looked nothing like the desperate girl who'd once slept on a shelter cot. Her natural hair, which she'd once tried to straighten to fit Kendrick's world, now fell in confident locks past her shoulders. Her eyes, though tired from late nights working after the twins went to bed, held a sharpness that hadn't been there before. Dawson Consulting, she hadn't added the "and company" yet because there was no company, just her, had grown from that first $500 job into something real. Word had spread through Tom Brennan's network, then into other industries. Small businesses, struggling restaurants, family-owned retail shops, they all had the same problems. Inefficiency, poor systems, money bleeding out through cracks they couldn't see. And Jasmine had become skilled at finding those cracks and sealing them. She'd helped 32 businesses in 5 years, working out of her apartment, meeting clients in coffee shops, building spreadsheets and systems while Jordan and Jada did their homework at the kitchen table. The money was better now, not great but steady. They had health insurance through a marketplace plan. The twins went to public school, but a good one, in a neighborhood where gunshots didn't echo through the nights. They ate 3 meals a day. They had winter coats that fit and shoes without holes. But Jasmine wanted more. She'd proven she could survive. Now she wanted to prove she could thrive. The email from Marcus Chen at TechVista Solutions came on a Tuesday morning while Jasmine was reviewing financials for a dry cleaning business. The subject line read, "Consulting opportunity, urgent." Ms. Dawson, I received your name from Tom Brennan, who said you're the best operational consultant he's ever worked with. TechVista is preparing for acquisition by a major competitor, and we need to get our operations audit ready in 3 months. The buyers are concerned about inefficiencies in our systems. If we can't demonstrate operational excellence, the deal falls through. Can we talk? Jasmine's hands had trembled as she typed her response. TechVista Solutions was a mid-sized software company with 200 employees and annual revenue in the tens of millions. This wasn't a mom-and-pop construction company or a struggling restaurant. This was real business. Corporate business. The kind of business Kendrick had once told her she'd never be good enough to understand. The meeting was at TechVista's headquarters in a gleaming building that made Jasmine's stomach clench with memories of the Meridian offices where she'd once scrubbed toilets. But this time, she walked through the front entrance. This time, the receptionist smiled and said, "Mr. Chen is expecting you." Marcus Chen was 40, sharp-eyed, and clearly stressed. His office was chaos. Papers everywhere, 3 computer monitors displaying different spreadsheets, empty coffee cups forming a small city on his desk. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he said, not bothering with small talk. "I'll be direct. We're being acquired by DataCore Systems for $45 million. But DataCore's due diligence team found significant operational issues. Redundant processes. Poor inventory management of our software licenses. Inefficient project workflows. They're concerned these inefficiencies are masking deeper problems. If we can't fix this in 3 months and prove it, they'll either reduce their offer or walk away entirely." Jasmine pulled out her tablet, her mind already racing. "Show me everything. Every system, every process, every complaint they've raised." For the next 8 hours, Marcus walked her through TechVista's operations. And Jasmine saw immediately what she'd seen so many times before, just on a larger scale. The company had grown fast, and instead of building proper systems, they'd patched together quick solutions that had calcified into inefficient permanent fixtures. "I can fix this," she'd said as the sun set outside Marcus's office windows. "But I'll need full access to your systems, cooperation from your department heads, and 3 months of focused work. It won't be cheap." She'd named a price that made her voice shake. $25,000. More money than she'd ever asked for. More money than she'd earned in her first 3 years of consulting combined. Marcus hadn't even blinked. "If you can save this acquisition, you're worth 5 times that. When can you start?" Jasmine had started the next day. She'd given notice at the accounting firm where she still worked part-time, arranged for after-school care for the twins, and thrown herself into TechVista's operational nightmare with the same fierce determination that had kept her alive in the shelter. She'd redesigned their project management workflow, eliminating 3 layers of unnecessary approval that were slowing everything down. She'd consolidated their software license management, discovering they were paying for over 100 licenses they weren't using, a waste of nearly $200,000 annually. She'd streamlined their client onboarding process, cutting the time from 6 weeks to 10 days. She'd identified redundant positions and recommended restructuring that would save money while actually improving efficiency. Every recommendation was backed by data, presented in clear reports that even non-technical executives could understand. She'd learned long ago that it wasn't enough to be right. You had to make people understand why you were right and make them feel confident in your solutions. When DataCore's due diligence team returned 8 weeks later, they'd found a transformed company. Processes documented. Workflows optimized. Systems running smoothly. The inefficiencies that had concerned them were gone, replaced by operational excellence that actually exceeded their standards. The acquisition had closed at the full $45 million. Marcus had called Jasmine into his office the day the deal finalized, and she'd expected a simple thank you. Instead, he'd handed her a check for $50,000, double what they'd agreed. "You didn't just save the acquisition," he'd said. "Your changes will save us over $300,000 annually in operational costs. That's value I can measure in every quarterly report for years to come. And I've already told 3 other CEOs in my network about you. Expect calls." The calls had come within a week. A manufacturing company preparing for expansion. A retail chain struggling with inventory management. A healthcare startup that needed to build operational systems from scratch. All of them willing to pay real money, corporate money, for expertise Jasmine had taught herself out of desperation and necessity. That night, sitting at her kitchen table with the $50,000 check in front of her, Jasmine had made a decision. Jordan was practicing his multiplication tables. Jada was reading ahead in her science textbook, because she always read ahead in everything. They were 6 years old now, smart and healthy and completely unaware of how close they'd come to disaster in those early years. Babies, Jasmine had said, and they'd both looked up. Mama's starting a real company. A real business with an office and everything. What should we call it? Dawson Company. Jordan had suggested immediately, always the bold one. Dawson and Company, Jada had corrected, because she paid attention to details. That sounds more professional. 2 months later, Jasmine had signed the lease on a modest office in a professional building downtown. 2 rooms, a small conference area, and a reception space she couldn't afford to staff yet. But it was hers. The bronze plaque by the door read, Dawson and Company. Consultancy in letters that caught the light. On opening day, Jasmine had stood in the empty office, remembering the shelter, the cleaning cart, the night she'd gone to bed hungry so the twins could eat. She'd pulled out her phone and scrolled to Kendrick's contact. She'd never deleted it, though she'd never called it either. She didn't call now. But she took a photo of her office, of the plaque with her name on it, of the professional space she'd built from nothing. She saved it to her phone, a private reminder of how far she'd traveled. You said I was nothing, she whispered to the ghost of his voice that still sometimes haunted her. You said I'd never be anything. Watch this. Just watch what nothing can build. Outside her window, the city hummed with possibility. And inside her modest office with its empty desks and fresh paint smell, Jasmine Dawson allowed herself to believe, for the first time since that terrible night with the rose petals and broken dreams, that maybe, just maybe, she was going to make it after all. The Forbes photographer asked Jasmine to stand by the window of her corner office, natural light highlighting the confidence she now wore as easily as the tailored charcoal suit that had cost more than a month's rent in that first studio apartment. Behind her, the city sprawled in afternoon sunlight, and somewhere in that cityscape was the penthouse where Kendrick had once told her she was nothing. Perfect, the photographer said. Hold that pose. You look powerful. Jasmine smiled, and it was genuine. She felt powerful. 10 years after being cast out with nothing but a positive pregnancy test and a shattered heart, she stood at the helm of Dawson and Company. Consultancy, a firm with 43 employees, offices in New York, Chicago, and Atlanta, and an annual revenue that had just crossed $8 million. The Forbes article would run next month under the headline, From Survival to Success. How Jasmine Dawson Built a Consulting Empire. The journalist had wanted to focus on the rags to riches narrative, the drama of homelessness and twin babies and impossible odds. Jasmine had given her some of that story, enough to be authentic, but she'd insisted the focus remain on the business itself, on the methodology she'd developed, on the results her firm delivered for clients. Tell me about your approach, the journalist had asked during the interview. What makes Dawson and Company different? Jasmine had leaned forward, animated by the question. We don't just identify problems. We embed ourselves in a company's culture and workflow. We understand that efficiency isn't just about cutting costs, it's about creating systems that allow people to do their best work. When employees aren't drowning in bureaucracy and poorly designed processes, they thrive. And when they thrive, the business thrives. It was a philosophy born from experience. Jasmine had lived through bad systems, had felt the weight of inefficiency crushing her when she'd worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. She knew what it felt like to work harder than everyone around you and still fail because the system was broken. That knowledge made her better at her job than consultants who'd gone to Harvard and never struggled a day in their lives. Her client list now included Fortune 500 companies. The manufacturing company that had called after the TechVista success had referred her to their parent corporation. That corporation had referred her to their business partners. Success bred success, and Jasmine had learned to leverage every victory into new opportunities. She'd hired carefully, building a team of analysts and operational experts who shared her philosophy. Marcus Chen had left TechVista 2 years ago to become her director of operations. Tom Brennan's daughter, who'd just graduated with an MBA, was her newest consultant. She surrounded herself with people who understood that behind every inefficient process were real people trying to do good work. The office itself was a statement. Sleek but not ostentatious. Professional but warm. The walls displayed framed success stories, before and after metrics from companies they'd transformed. In the conference room, she'd hung a small piece of art that Jordan had made when he was 7, a crayon drawing of their family with the caption, "Mama fixes things." Ms. Dawson, her executive assistant, Rachel, appeared in the doorway. The twin school just called. Jordan and Jada's debate team won the regional competition. They're advancing to nationals. Jasmine felt the familiar swell of pride that came every time her children accomplished something remarkable, which was often, "Send flowers to their coach," and "Clear my schedule for nationals. I don't care what's on the calendar that week." After Rachel left, Jasmine pulled out her phone and looked at the family photo on her home screen. Jordan and Jada at 10 years old, standing on either side of her in matching debate team blazers. Jordan had grown into his father's commanding presence, but with a kindness Kendrick had never possessed. Jada had inherited Jasmine's analytical mind, but with a confidence that came from never being told she wasn't enough. They were extraordinary children. Honor students at a prestigious private academy that Jasmine could now easily afford. Fluent in English, Spanish, and Mandarin because Jasmine had hired tutors the moment she could afford them. Jordan excelled in mathematics and debate, already talking about studying engineering. Jada devoured science textbooks and had recently informed Jasmine she intended to be a surgeon. Neither of them remembered the shelter. Neither remembered the nights when dinner was crackers and water. Jasmine had made sure of that. By the time they were old enough to form lasting memories, she'd already clawed her way into stability. They knew she worked hard, they'd grown up watching her build the business, but they didn't know about the desperation that had fueled those early years. Sometimes Jasmine wondered if she should tell them about Kendrick. They knew they had a father who wasn't in their lives. She'd told them a carefully edited version of the truth, that she and their father had divorced before they were born, that he'd chosen not to be part of their family. She'd never spoken his name, never showed them pictures, never told them he'd denied their existence while they were still in her womb. "Do you ever want to meet him?" Jada had asked once, her analytical mind puzzling through the gaps in the story. "No," Jordan had answered before Jasmine could speak. "Why would we want to meet someone who didn't want us? We have Mama. That's enough." And it had been enough. More than enough. Jasmine had filled their lives with love, opportunity, and unwavering support. She'd been there for every science fair, every debate tournament, every parent-teacher conference. She'd taught them that their worth wasn't determined by who their father was or wasn't, but by who they chose to become. The intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Dawson, your 4 o'clock is here. The CEO of Harrington Pharmaceuticals." Jasmine's pen paused mid-signature. Harrington Pharmaceuticals. The name triggered something in her memory, but she couldn't quite place it. "Give me 5 minutes, then send them in." She reviewed the preliminary file. Harrington Pharmaceuticals wanted help streamlining their research and development processes. It was exactly the kind of high-profile, high-value project that had become Dawson and Company's specialty. The meeting would be standard, assess their needs, propose a scope of work, negotiate terms. Except when Richard Harrington walked into her office, followed by his daughter Vivian, Jasmine's professional smile froze on her face. Vivian Harrington. Pharmaceutical heiress. The woman Kendrick had left her for. The woman he'd called, someone who actually deserves to be with a successful man like me. 10 years had passed, but Jasmine recognized her immediately from the society pages, from the photos she'd tortured herself with in those early years. Vivian was polished and poised in a cream designer suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile practiced and professional. If Vivian recognized Jasmine's name, she showed no sign of it. Why would she? Jasmine Dawson, successful CEO, bore no resemblance to the desperate girl Kendrick had discarded. And Kendrick had probably never even mentioned his ex-wife's name. "Ms. Dawson," Richard Harrington extended his hand. "Thank you for meeting with us. Your reputation precedes you. My colleague Marcus Chen speaks very highly of your work." Jasmine shook his hand, her professional mask sliding firmly into place. "Mr. Harrington. Ms. Harrington. Please sit. Tell me about the challenges you're facing." As they talked through operational inefficiencies and research delays, a plan began forming in Jasmine's mind. Not revenge. She was beyond that now. But something else. A way to step fully into the life she'd built, to stand in the same rooms as the people who'd once dismissed her, and show them exactly who Jasmine Dawson had become. The meeting ended with a handshake and a promise to send a proposal by Friday. As the Harringtons left, Vivian paused at the door. "It's refreshing to meet a woman leading a firm like this," she said. "There aren't enough of us in business." "No," Jasmine agreed, her smile sharp. "There aren't." After they left, Jasmine stood at her window, looking out over the city that had almost destroyed her and that she'd learned to conquer instead. Somewhere out there, Kendrick Ray was living his life, probably never thinking about the woman and children he'd thrown away. But that was about to change. Jasmine could feel it like electricity in the air before a storm. Their worlds were about to collide again. And this time, she wouldn't be the one left broken. Before we get into the next part of the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you re-hooked in and ready to enjoy the next part of the story. Because more beautiful stories will be shared and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Thanks for watching, subscribe and stay tuned.